When you think of Disney drop rides, the first thing that comes to your mind is Tower of Terror, but Disney once owned another drop ride, one that actually muffled the screams of terrified riders. But how did this mostly forgotten drop ride come into existence? How and why did it muffle people's screams? Let's find out today on Theme Park Crazy. Now let's go back to the mid-1990s, when Florida's Disney World was standing tall as a world-renowned tourist destination. The Disney decade had led to massive expansions in the Florida resort, with the addition of Blizzard Beach in 1995 and Animal Kingdom in 1998. Meanwhile though, Disney officials were struggling to expand their California park. While Disney World had plenty of open Florida land to work with, Disneyland was landlocked inside an Orange County residential area. Throughout the 90s, several expansion ideas were considered, including a West Coast version of Epcot named Westcott. This idea and more were shot down for a variety of reasons. For one thing, local residents were vehemently opposed to a second Disney park. They knew it would bring even more traffic, crowds, and noise that were already an issue with Disneyland. That part about noise will come up later. Moreover, the initial failure of France's over-budgeted Euro Disneyland took a major toll on the company, both financially and creatively. Disney CEO Michael Eisner wanted to expand, but he also wanted to cut costs to make sure another Euro Disneyland didn't happen. And as if that weren't bad enough, Disney President Frank Wells would tragically and suddenly die in a helicopter accident in 1994. All of these setbacks would severely hinder the park's expansion plans, and while Disney officials persevered with expanding, they would have to seriously scale things back a bit. Soon after Wells' passing, Disney officials would hold a company meeting to come up with an idea for a new California theme park. It was at this meeting that Michael Eisner brought up the idea of theming the park to its home state, California. He figured that tourists would only spend part of their trips at Disney and the rest visiting the state's other famous attractions. So why not theme the park to California's other tourist destinations to get people to stay longer? This meeting would end up being the inception of Disney's California Adventure, a theme park themed to everything California is famous for. In order to make sure the project didn't end up like Euro Disney, the company appointed newly appointed Director of Park Operations Paul Pressler to oversee the new park's development. Pressler's background was in merchandising, and his experience with cost-cutting measures gave company officials peace of mind. But in the words of Hotel Mario, when you pinch pennies, they pinch back. The new park would be built on the old spot of Disneyland's parking lot, which would be replaced with multiple parking garages over time. Construction would end up lasting 3 years, and the park would finally open to the public on February 8, 2001. Upon its opening, the park as a whole received a widely negative reception from critics. Many felt that the park was cheaply made and lacked the charm of Disney's other theme parks. Aside from the acclaimed Soarin' over California and Grizzly Peak themed area, the attractions as a whole felt like they were thrown together at the last minute. These attractions included several boring theater shows, as well as the infamous Superstar Limo Dark Ride, which consisted entirely of cheap celebrity cameos and nothing else. But perhaps the most out-of-place area was Paradise Pier. Built to resemble a classic California boardwalk park, this area more closely resembled a run-of-the-mill carnival than an A-list Disney theme park. Among its attractions were the following. First, there was the Orange Stinger. This is just your standard swing ride that you could find at pretty much every amusement park out there. Then there was California Screamin', a launched roller coaster by Swiss manufacturer Intamin. Several other rides filled the area, but the one we'll be focusing on today is the Maliboomer. This ride was a space shot drop tower model built by American manufacturer S&S Power, now known as S&S Sansei. This attraction was one of 2 tower rides built by the manufacturer. The first was the Turbo Drop, which slowly took riders to the top before shooting them down faster than gravity. The other was the Space Shot, which shot riders to the top of the tower. Both designs used compressed air to power them, and by 2001, they had become incredibly popular in the industry. In order to increase capacity, the Maliboomer would consist of 3 separate towers connected at the top. Each one sat 16 people at a time, and they would each operate individually. The structure as a whole stood at a top height of 185 feet or 56 meters. Still though, this off-the-shelf ride was yet another reminder of how run-of-the-mill California Adventure felt. Each of the Maliboomer's towers were built to resemble a strength tester carnival game. This common fairground game challenges customers to use a mallet to hit a lever and ring a bell at the top. This game is a mainstay at pretty much every fairground, and the idea of incorporating it into a space shot ride was actually pretty clever. But there was one more thing about this drop tower that really stood out from other rides of its kind. This difference, however, was much less of a design choice and more of a necessity. As stated earlier, the Disneyland Resort is landlocked inside of a residential area. For decades, residents have taken issue with the noise generated by the resort's fireworks display and other attractions. So Disney was already on thin ice with the city of Anaheim when designing California Adventure. In order to appease nearby residents, Disney had to modify some of their attractions to reduce the output of noise. For California Screamin', several sections of the layout were covered with tunnels to block the screaming of riders. Meanwhile, the Maliboomer had its own method of reducing noise. On each of the over-the-shoulder restraints, tall plexiglass shields were placed in front of the passengers' faces. These were known as scream shields, and they served to keep riders' screams from reaching nearby residential areas. Park guests, meanwhile, were mostly unaware of why exactly the shields were necessary. Many people, including park employees, reportedly thought the shields were to keep people from vomiting onto guests down below. This led to some people referring to them as puke shields, and that nasty concept likely turned people off from riding it. While necessary for local audio ordinances, the scream shields were aesthetically unappealing. They looked like one of those cones people use to keep their dogs from scratching their ears. All in all, while the Maliboomer itself was thrilling and functional, many considered it to be a milquetoast ride that emphasized how rushed and cheap the park was. After its opening, the park's attendance massively underperformed expectations. In the time that it opened, park attendance was less than half of Disneyland's. So that means around 7 million people who visited Disneyland during that time took a look at this brand new theme park and said, nah. Its initial debut is often considered to be one of the biggest failures in theme park history. It was cheap, cheesy, and nowhere near the level of quality people have come to expect from Disney. After the death of Frank Wells, Michael Eisner's once creative touch was hampered by budget cuts and a misguided lack of innovation. California Adventure was certainly a failure, but fortunately, it didn't stay that way for long. From that point on, Disney vowed to improve the park with new additions and refurbishments. First off, the terrible Superstar Limo ride was closed down less than a year after it opened. Next, a series of new attractions would give a second wind to the park's popularity over the next decade. In 2004, the park opened a West Coast version of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror called the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. I mean, there's nothing else you can really call it. While it didn't feature the dark ride portion of the Florida version, it was still a thrilling and well-themed experience that was loved by park guests. Attendance for the park increased 9% with the addition of the new ride. On the other hand, the less impressive Maliboomer was left looking like an inferior alternative. From the guest perspective, why would they ride a run-of-the-mill drop tower with cumbersome scream shields when they could experience a well-themed and more high-quality drop ride instead? Plus, Supreme Scream was not too far away, offering a taller, more impressive ride experience for much less money. Needless to say, the Maliboomer's popularity would seriously decline over the years. However, the ride's final nail in the coffin came when Disney announced a massive renovation of the Paradise Pier area. They wanted the area to emphasize the nostalgic charm of California's early 1900s boardwalk parks, in a break with its standard carnival appearance. Disneyland Resort spokeswoman Betsy Sanchez would state, quote, "A drop tower attraction such as the Maliboomer came after that time period and is no longer in line with the theme of Paradise Pier." While the early 1900s didn't have electromagnetic launch coasters either, California Screamin' at least had the aesthetic of a classic roller coaster. But with the Maliboomer, the ride would just be out of place, according to Disney officials at least. Many speculate the real reason for the ride's closure was the opening of Tower of Terror, and its aforementioned superiority as a drop ride. While some park fans celebrated the removal of such a generic attraction, there were still some diehards who really didn't want it to close. There was even a Facebook page named Save the Maliboomer, so after less than a decade of operation, the Maliboomer would close down for good on September 7th, 2010. It would be swiftly demolished, but the space wouldn't be reused for almost a decade. In 2017, Disney announced yet another retheme was coming to Paradise Pier. This would see the park's California boardwalk aesthetic re-themed to the many acclaimed films of Pixar. This followed the extreme level success of the new Cars-themed land, which unlike Cars 2, received massive critical acclaim. The whole Paradise Pier area would reopen as Pixar Pier in 2019. California Screamin' would be rethemed to The Incredibles, and the old spot of the Maliboomer would be reused for a tame flat ride named Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind. While the Incredicoaster received generally favorable reviews, Emotional Whirlwind was criticized for being a standard carnival ride with inside-out dressing on it. Many people actually preferred the Maliboomer since it was much more thrilling. Nowadays, the Maliboomer is mostly forgotten by Disney park fans. However, while the Maliboomer is no more, the concept of Scream Shield still exists in South Korea. The gyro drop at Lotte World features the same kind of plexiglass shields, also serving the purpose of noise reduction. You could say it acts as a spiritual successor, and the Maliboomer definitely deserves some recognition for introducing this concept. Sure, it's a bizarre and cumbersome concept, but an innovative concept nonetheless. Before we wrap things up, check out my merchandise shop for Theme Park Crazy merchandise. Take a photo wearing one of my shirts at a park, and feel free to send it to me at themeparkcrazy1992@gmail.com. Your photo may be featured on my Instagram page. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.